I'm kind of nervous about this one. Let me start by giving a disclaimer that everything that I share in all of my videos is very subjective opinions. I just enjoy talking about books that I like, books that I've read, books that maybe didn't live up to my specific expectation, but I know that my tastes may not conform to everybody's taste, and I think that's 100% okay. It's one of the things that I love about reading is being able to talk to people that have totally different opinions than I do. I think that's why a lot of us love reading and a lot of us enjoy this online community of booktube and booktok and bookstagram, and it really is a beautiful place to see what people are reading, see what their opinions are of things, and I think that it has given a lot of positive, beautiful things to the world. On the flip side of it, there are some things that I don't appreciate as much about the internet community of books, and that is mostly the hype train. I've kind of talked about this a few times in some past videos, but there is absolutely this phenomenon of hyping up books on the internet, getting a lot of people's expectations and excitements up for the book, and it is just not at all what people are saying it is. And I think then if you come out and say that you have a different opinion about the book, it kind of makes you a pariah in the community because everybody wants to be on the bandwagon together. And then there's one person over here that is like, well, actually, I didn't really like that book very much, or I think it was misrepresented in the way that it was presented on the internet. There's a lot of nuances that go into this. So today, I'm going to talk about some of the books that I have read and personally think are overhyped on the internet. I want to give a disclaimer that if you've read some of these books and you really like them, I think that's amazing. I think it's great that we can find different things to like about different books. These are books, however, that I think the internet just got my expectations up way too high, and I guess I just don't get it. I don't really get what people like about these books. So we're gonna do this together. I'm gonna do something that I haven't really done before and talk about books that I didn't like. Before we get started, if you have any books that you think are majorly overhyped in the book community, I would love to hear your opinions on them. Drop them in the comments and let's start a conversation and hopefully not start any fights. Be respectful about it. I'm very curious what people think. And I would also love to know if you disagree with me on this list. So grab your sparkling water, grab your tea, grab your drink of choice, and let's get into it. The first book that I think is overhyped that I read this year is The Guest List by Lucy Foley. This book is kind of like an Agatha Christie-esque, and then there were none, people dying on an island type adventure. Lucy Foley is hailed as a modern queen of mystery, and I know a lot of people compare her to Agatha Christie in some of her writings. I have read a good amount of Agatha Christie books, and I've read a good amount of that type of kind of cozy killer mysteries that she has written. And of course, And Then There Were None is my favorite Agatha Christie book. So when this was compared to it, I had a lot of expectations for it, and I also saw people talking about it on the internet so much, especially people that read Book of the Month, especially people that like mystery and generally enjoy that genre. They loved this book from what I could tell. I am really on a quest to find good mystery books, and this is one of the first ones that I picked up this year. So The Guest List follows 5 main characters that are attending a wedding on this remote island. One of the characters is murdered, and it's kind of like a dual timeline, not totally linear, as we are following our main characters up to the point of the murder, but we're also following all of the characters right after the murder happens. So we're kind of jumping in between timelines and perspectives here, which I do enjoy that type of writing style, and I actually think Lucy Foley's writing style is really solid, and she does a good job at being descriptive, describing the environments, and really bringing you along for the entire story. I think I was very captivated with the actual plot. One of the main complaints that I have about this book is 100% a personal preference. The characters sucked. They are all miserable people who hate themselves and hate each other, and there is no joy or happiness to be found anywhere. And reading about miserable people is a miserable reading experience for me. And I personally am a character reader, so I mostly read books for the characters. In this instance, I was reading for the plot though. I was so done with these characters. They felt very pretentious, very victimizing, very full of themselves, but also kind of bratty and immature at the same time. And I just didn't enjoy a single perspective. And there are 5 perspectives. That was another thing that was really difficult for me to get into, was that we are jumping between 5 different characters in a pretty short book. And one of the perspectives is not even from a character. It's kind of like a narrator perspective. So let's call it 6 different perspectives in a short book. It felt like I didn't even get to spend enough time with each character to draw a connection with them. So the characters being something that caused me to like this book was not an option. So then I was in it for the plot. I just wanted to know who killed our murder victim. And I'm just afraid that the ending was very unsatisfying to me. It felt coincidental. It felt like there were a bunch of twists and reveals that were given to us towards the end that maybe we should have seen coming. Like the author was kind of like, ha, gotcha. Did you start to guess it? And I'm like, no, I didn't start to guess this. You gave us 0 clues up to this point. There was nothing to lead us to this conclusion, and therefore it felt like it came very out of left field, but not in a way that was like a cool, big revealing twist. More in a way that's like, I feel like you wrote yourself into a wall here and didn't know how to get out of it, so you just kind of pulled a plot point out of thin air and expect us to be surprised by the reveal. So the plot also ended up being something that contributed to me not liking the book. I think I just had a bad time with it. I was just not having fun reading this book. It's not a fun book. And maybe people don't read it because it's a fun book. I get that. I also completely understand that I don't love mystery as much as the next person might. So maybe somebody that loves the genre holds this book in very high regard. Me personally, I don't really get it. So, The next book that I think is pretty overhyped is actually one that I was really expecting to like. I think I've gotten to a point now where if I am choosing to read a book based off of the internet's opinion, I go into it pretty guarded because I've been let down before. But this is one that I actually had on my shelf long before it even became an internet sensation. I just hadn't read it yet, but I had initially purchased it because it seemed like a very interesting plot and premise to me. And then when I finally did read it, it was because it was getting a lot of attention, and that is The Atlas 6 by Olivia Blake. This book really had all of the key elements that I like in a book. We've got magic, we've got romance, we've got a very great ensemble, we've got a secret society, we've got kind of an element of library, books, different historical antiquities, we've got a school/academy aspect of it, we've got competition against the people that you're in a group with. There's so many things in this book that I really liked. And then once I started reading it, I lost interest pretty quickly. I think the main reason that I lost interest, this is so stupid. This is a really stupid thing that I'm about to say, but this book is so pretentious. This book takes itself so seriously. The prose and the writing style itself, I think, is my main complaint, which is not usually something that I care about that much, but holy crap, it literally would take away from the plot. I actually think the plot is pretty interesting. It's these 6 characters that are put into this secret society, and they all have special powers, and they're learning how to use those powers and work as a group and protect this secret society that holds secrets of the world. I think that's really interesting. And the plot was action-packed. The character relationships were interesting at first, and then they got a little bit weird. But the prose was very flowery, very romantic, very unnecessary in my opinion. There would be whole pages of poetic nonsense is the best way that I can describe it. And I just remembered thinking the whole time that I was reading it, oh my gosh, get on with it. We're literally in the middle of like a battle to the death, a fight scene right now. And this author goes on and on about the morality of death, and it annoyed the crap out of of me, and I kind of skimmed towards the end, and it ends on a pretty big cliffhanger, and I do want to stick it out and read the rest of the books in the series, because there's nothing more annoying to me than not finishing a series, even if I don't like the first book, but I'm having a lot of trouble making myself get to that point. So for those reasons, I think that the Atlas 6 is pretty overhyped. Moving on. The next book is one that I read a while ago, quite a few years ago, and I actually didn't think that a lot of people knew about it or have read it, but recently, like in the last couple of weeks, I've seen it making its rounds on the internet. That is Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia. This book was one of the first times that I felt true anger at the end of a book, because I loved the beginning of this. This is very Nancy Drew. I don't know if anybody grew up playing her interactive Nancy Drew games or even reading the Nancy Drew books. You feel like you are a detective solving this mystery, and this book had all of that. So it follows our main character Naomi, who is going to visit her cousin, who is recently married into an English family, but they live on this big grand estate in Mexico. And her cousin is mysteriously very ill. She's acting very differently to how she normally does. And Naomi is like, this white family has taken my cousin and is basically holding her hostage in this mansion, and she's becoming sick because of it. So she goes to the mansion, to the estate, and plays Nancy Drew to solve the mystery of what is happening to her cousin. And while she's there, spooky things start happening. The house itself is starting to feel very haunted to her. The whole family is really weird and creepy. The grandfather, the patriarch of the family, is super, super old, should have been dead forever ago, but he's very creepy and has a particular interest in Naomi herself that is so unsettling and weird. And Naomi is just trying to solve these clues and go on this almost like a treasure hunt to figure out what is going on with this family and what is going on with her cousin. I loved that part of the book, and there's a little bit of romance in there, which also is very compelling in my opinion. Big fan, loved the writing style. I think the characters were great, but the ending made me so mad. And I don't think anybody else agrees with me on this, but here I am thinking that this is more of like your classic mystery book where she's gonna solve the mystery and it's all gonna be tied up at the end. Maybe not a happy ending, but at least the reader is going to know conclusively what has happened. And the way that the author explains everything that's happening suddenly morphs into the supernatural and into like a fantasy element, which was mega disappointing because it felt like such a cop-out where she is talking about all these phenomenons that are happening in the house, and Naomi feels like she's being haunted and she's having all of these dreams and everything is making her crazy and it's making her cousin crazy. And I'm like, okay, are they being drugged? Like, what is happening right now? And then the author's like, no, and it's like a fantasy realm that is, you know, actually legitimately haunting them. And it just felt like because of that, she didn't need to explain any of the details. She didn't need to give any whys behind the whats that were happening. And that was super frustrating to me because I liked this book so much, and it just felt like she created one giant plot hole for herself and then was like, but it's okay because magic. Again, I hadn't heard anybody talk about this book for so long, and recently I'm seeing a bunch of people read it, and I don't know, I don't want to put a damper on things, but that's just how I felt. Give it a try if you want to, but maybe knowing and expecting that it's more of a fantasy book towards the end would help you like the book more, because I wasn't expecting that at all, and it was a big surprise and a big old bummer. Okay, I've saved some of the more controversial books for the back half here, but let's just jump into it. Next, I'm going to talk about Lark by Alex Astor. There's a lot of things that could be said here. I think the main thing that people talk about when it comes to this book is just the controversy with how it was published and even how it affected the publishing industry moving on. Very shortened version. Basically, the author kind of used TikTok as a way to garner hype and a virality that ended up getting this book published. She just put the premise, kind of the elevator pitch of the book itself on TikTok. It got, I don't even know how many views and hits, but it went mega viral, and she got a publishing deal because of that. I don't know if she was a published author before that or how much experience she had with writing itself, but I will say that this is a poorly written book. The premise of the book is that the island of Lark disappears and reappears once every 100 years and allows the rulers of this realm, I don't remember how many there are, but there's like 7 rulers or something, and they all have to go fight on this island of Lark to break an individual curse that is related to the country that they rule. And so that's where we pick up. Our main character's name is Isla Crown, who is working to break her curse, and she goes to the island of Lark to meet all of the other rulers and fight to the death, I guess. People love that premise, again, which is why it got published. But premise aside, I actually just think the writing was not good. The world building itself felt very shallow and inconsistent. I think there were key elements of the magic system that were left completely unexplained and unidentified, which made buying into the story itself very difficult. I also think there were a lot of plot pacing issues and inconsistencies. It felt like there were oftentimes major plot points that were revealed and introduced to the reader very abruptly and then moved on from super quickly, like it wasn't fleshed out, and we were just told to accept this major truth bomb that was just dropped as fact, even though it's something that could have been a lot more helpful to the reader maybe in the beginning of the book. But again, it just felt like she was writing herself into a hole and then had to backtrack and be like, but that's okay over here because this is a thing that is true about this world. But nothing was introduced at the very beginning, so the foundation of it felt confusing, but then the pacing of how she introduced stuff afterwards was either really rushed or really slow, and she would focus on certain character points or conversations that just felt like they were not driving the plot line at all. This next point kind of comes down to a personal preference, but it was pretty predictable and it followed a pretty common formula that you would see in young adult romance books at the time, which can be fine, but it really felt a little bit copy and paste sometimes. And again, I think the character development was just super flat. Like, I want to see a character that grows throughout the entire plot of the book, and our characters remained very static, very dull, and very two-dimensional. They didn't change, they didn't grow, and they didn't actually do anything or make important enough decisions that moved the plot along, in my opinion. So it just felt like, what are we doing here right now? And then you add that on top of the marketing and the execution of the whole TikTok thing and how it blew up, and it just feels like this book doesn't deserve all of the hype that it's gotten. People have talked about this book and people have loved this book, and other people have accused those people of being plants. Like, it's very spicy out there on the internet when it comes to Lark, but I personally did not enjoy this book. Ooh, next one I'm scared to talk about, but we're gonna do it. From Blood and Ash by Jennifer L. Armentrout. This is a book that I picked up because I wanted to read something similar to ACOTAR. I had a major ACOTAR hangover and a Throne of Glass hangover, actually. Now that I think about it, I had just finished Throne of Glass as well, and I wanted an action-packed, romantasy, strong female lead, long series to just dive back into, and pretty much unanimously, the internet was like, yeah, you need to read From Blood and Ash for sure. I actually semi-enjoyed the first book. When I first read it, I finished this, and I was pretty into it. There were things that I didn't love about it, but I made it a point to try and move on to the next one. The next book in this series, though, was a DNF about 150 pages in. This book follows Poppy, who's our main character, who is the maiden, and she is chosen from birth to be this picture of purity and serenity, and she can't be touched and she can't be looked at, so she always wears a veil, and her destiny in life is to be be essentially sacrificed to the gods because they require a pure sacrifice of a virgin maiden or something. There's, a rebellion going on, and she starts to get close with this rebel guard, and they have like a love story thing going on. The writing itself felt super repetitive, and at times there were just full unnecessary things that we were focusing on that made the pacing feel really, really slow at times. But then we would jump into a scene in the next chapter that's like end of the world type level action, and so it felt very jarring. It felt like I was being jerked around a lot when it come to just the pacing. I also think that the characters as well in this one are really two-dimensional, and they don't grow at all or change or develop, except for Poppy. But the only way that she grows and develops is basically just being comfortable being touched by a man. That is the only thing that she grows and develops in. She just is kind of a brat the whole time and never really makes a choice for herself, unless the choice is getting down and freaky with this guy that she can't resist. I think that there's an unnecessary amount of spice in this book. Again, it just fully takes away from the plot. Like, I just wanted to move on at this point, but the pacing was so slow. You could cut out probably a third, maybe a half of this book and get the full plot still, and it probably would be a lot better. And again, I did finish this book and I was like, okay, like maybe we could get here. This might work. Book 2, holy crap, that book was so annoying to me. And then I ended up just looking up what happens in the rest of the series and made the personal decision for myself that I would not be continuing on. From Blood and Ash, I think, is highly overhyped, and especially for people that are looking for books similar to a Sarah J. Maas book, you're always gonna fall into the trap of seeing From Blood and Ash, and I personally don't think it's worth it. Just do yourself a favor and move on to something else. The next one, ooh, I'm scared to talk about this one. People love this book. The next one I'm going to talk about is Lauren Roberts' Powerless. This book, in my opinion, is very overhyped, and it kind of hurts me to say that about this one because this is a debut novel in a different way that Light Lark was a debut novel, because again, you had the like TikTok element of that. I didn't really see that element of marketing with Powerless. This felt more kind of like traditionally published, like she really did the work to write a book and get it published, and I think that is such a major accomplishment. So I don't want to downplay that at all. I just think that the only thing wrong with this, from what I could tell, was a missed expectation on my part. I saw everywhere on the internet people obsessed over this book. It was getting 5-star after 5-star from people that I really trust their opinion, from booktubers and bookstagrammers that I watch regularly, and we have similar opinions. And so when I saw people talking about this book so much, I got really, really, really excited because I was like, okay, great, we got fantasy, we got romance, we've got like a kind of Hunger Games, Divergent style games. I am all about that. I love that type of book, and I think I just got my hopes up too high, and that probably is mostly on me. Again, I think Lauren Roberts accomplished something really awesome with this book that shouldn't be taken away from her, and I still haven't read the second book. I tried. I got 12 pages in, and I just realized it wasn't the right time for me. I think that the writing in this was younger than I was expecting and a little bit simpler than I was hoping for as well. It was a lot of telling me things, not showing me things, and so I felt like there was a disconnect between how I felt about the characters and the plot. She wasn't really garnering true emotions from me. She was just telling me how I should feel in a lot of ways. There were some cute moments with the main characters. There were some cool moments with Peyton in like an action-packed way. I like the element of the magic system and the powers and just like the hierarchy of the kingdom. I do think that that's compelling and interesting. I think it just is a little bit simpler than I was hoping for, and maybe a little bit cringier in some of the tropes and some of the plot points that she chose to include. Again, it felt like sometimes we were copy and pasting from other books that we know had done well, which again, I'm not always against, but but for a book that had been talked about so highly for so long, I was hoping for a little bit more originality and maybe uniqueness in it, and I didn't really get that. So I was a bit confused why people liked this book so much, because it didn't really feel like it matched up with what people were saying about it, just in my personal opinion. I do want to give the second book a try, because again, I think that in this case, her writing can only get better. She can only improve. I think about a lot like a Sarah J. Maas when she wrote Throne of Glass. She was so young, it was her first book, and I still think Throne of Glass is not a very good book. I love the series itself. The first book though, the writing is not great. She has improved greatly over her time of writing books, and I see the potential here for Lauren Roberts to really, really improve in her writing style. So I do think this one was overhyped, but unlike the other books, I didn't dislike this book, and I am very hopeful for where the series can go and the author can go. And I think that she could really be successful and do some great things, but I just was disappointed in this one. And then the last book that I'm going to talk about is more of an honorable mention, because I can't officially include it in this list because I didn't finish it. And that is Shadow and Bone. Now, what's interesting is that I love the Grishaverse. I love Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom. That is one of my favorite series duologies ever. I love the characters so much. It has a very, very special place in my heart. I read Six of Crows first, and then I was very excited to move on to Shadow and Bone and that whole trilogy, because that came before Six of Crows and it's mentioned a lot and the whole universe seems very interesting, and so I was very excited for it. I got about halfway, completely lost interest, and DNF'd it. A while later, the TV show came out, watched that, it was okay, but it did spark in me the desire to try to read this book again, so I started it over. To be fair, I also really don't like a love triangle, and that always kind of turns me off to a plot and a book, and this definitely has that. Aside from that, it just didn't catch my interest at all. And I know people really, really love this series. A lot of people love the series way more than they like Six of Crows. And then of course it goes on to King of Scars as well, which I've heard great things about and I actually own. It's on my shelf right now, but it feels wrong to try to read King of Scars without really finishing the first trilogy that started it all. And again, I'm not officially including it in this list because I can't, because I didn't finish the book the 2 times that I tried to read it. And maybe the other 2 books are incredible and the ending of this book is incredible and it would change my life, but I just have zero desire to get into it, and I don't really know why. Maybe somebody can explain it to me, but it's always been a confusion to me and a great failing of my life that I haven't been able to get through this book. But you know what? That's where personal preference comes in, and all of these books, if you like them, I think that's great, and I'm not saying that you're wrong and I'm right, or I'm wrong and you're right. It's just a personal preference thing, and I think that personally these books are overhyped, and I'm sorry if people disagree with me, and if you've made it to the end of this video and you still want to be friends and still want to watch my videos and hang out with me and drink sparkling water with me, that would be great. If not though, I completely understand. I have a list of books that I think do deserve the hype that they get, and I'm gonna include that in an upcoming video, as well as maybe do a part 2 of overhyped books, because I just have so many opinions on a lot of books that I don't think deserve all of the recognition that they get. But that is a video for another time. Please comment down below books that you think are overhyped, or if you disagree with me, let's have a conversation. I would love to talk it out. And thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.